Hello, welcome to the Q&A. I think I've finally, this time for real guys, sorted out the audio levels on the Q&A. And today we'll be talking about philosophy and God, I suppose, as kind of a sequel, perhaps, to the video I released on atheism. And today we're joined by some guests, one we've had before. Say hi, Franz.
Hello.
Oscar.
Hello.
Joined by Louis the 14th, 1685 violin.
Hello.
Joined by Louis Posting, otherwise known as Mick.
Hello.
And finally we're joined by Mo. So hello, Mo.
Hi.
Right, so the first question from Rory Halpin. What Christian church would you recommend? I think we're pretty much in unanimous agreement on this one, and that is the Roman Catholic Church.
The correct church.
Yes.
Yes.
The one true church.
Yes. Denominations are a meme, honestly.
Yeah, well, they don't exist. There is a church, and then you have denominations.
Yeah, I mean you've got like one church and one orthodoxy because there's only one truth, and then you've got deviations from that, and that's what Protestantism is. And Eastern Orthodoxy in certain cases can be a bit like that, as I'm sure.
In some instances, I would almost go as far as to not refer to Protestants as Christians.
It depends on the kind. Like Jehovah's Witnesses aren't Christian; they don't believe Christ is God.
Absolutely not.
Mormons, same sort of
Definitely
deal.
aren't Christians.
Yeah. And a lot of these moralistic therapeutic deist types are bad as well.
Yeah, they really are. I think my parents go in that direction.
But we should probably articulate why Protestantism should largely be ignored.
Yeah.
Well, because there's clearly an apostolic succession going on with the church. This is established when Matthias is elected to replace Judas, and that is where the first bishops come from. The letter to the Magnesians by St. Ignatius of Antioch also further indicates that we should completely obey our bishops. And most Protestant denominations do not have bishops at all. They don't even have a name, let alone a valid apostolic succession on the bishops.
Yep.
So that essentially leaves Anglicans, who have always been a meme. They don't actually have any orthodoxy at all. They have guidelines. You have the Catholics and you have the Eastern churches. And, I mean, Episcopalians and Anglican continuation people, which is the same as the Anglicans, really. So...
Yeah, the branch theory is a bit of a meme.
Mm.
It's hard, very difficult to justify, if it even is possible.
Yeah, they just sort of split off for no reason. And, I mean, Lutheranism is cancer as well, because it denies the Eucharist out. Well, I mean, I think it does nowadays. Like, they used to not.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, some parts. Didn't Luther early on have the idea of the bread and wine actually turning to the body and blood of our Lord, but only during the Mass or something, like a temporary...
Yeah, I think that was the
temporary
idea.
transubstantiation.
Yeah.
He had like an alternative metaphysical idea.
But this is probably...
Didn't really work.
This is probably a little bit hard to articulate for the average person watching. Most people here will be like people who are like, oh, Ephraim's got me interested in Christianity, why should I start with the Catholic Church? Or just go into the Catholic Church and stay there. Basically because it's got the hardest philosophical framework of any of them. By far.
Yeah.
The Eastern Orthodox have nothing on that.
No. Well, they do on the points we agree with them on, but when it comes to papal authority, for example, that they don't really have any. They don't really have anything. We use the same sources, mostly on that, and
Yeah, I'm sure you can hear certain people spurging out about that, but those certain people don't have any understanding of metaphysics at all. So we're going to dismiss these people because they don't exist. Yeah, it's the important part of theology is systematizing things. If you can't fit it into a system that accounts for everything in the world, then it's wrong. Because everything exists in the same world. That includes visible and invisible things. This is just how it is.
Yeah. And the Catholic Church does that, and for things that people might not think it does. But some of those things might be a bit like technical, shall we say?
I've tried to treat of them in the most subtle way I possible, or the most clear way I can in videos, but by the nature of them, they're very difficult to articulate. in a way that doesn't require specialist vocabulary.
Yeah, it requires quite a bit of research on the person's part if you want to have that conversation.
Okay, we're gonna have another person on. Ribman, you're now on with recording. Say hi, Ribman. Or not, as the case may be. She'll unmute at some point. She might not speak. I mean...
One should note that Ribman is a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, so she might not speak, but she can chime in when she wants. But essentially, it's about having the best system possible to approach the world, and frankly, people like Palamas were never systematic theologians, they never intended to be, and trying to manipulate them through a quasi-systematic framework does not produce anything useful. Whereas somebody like Aquinas, Duns Scotus, to a certain extent, people like Bonaventure as well. I mean, Bonaventure certainly even. You get these sorts of systems that can explain the entire world, whereas with other ones, yeah, you can't. So, is there anything anybody else wanted to add?
Yeah, I think the Protestant churches, they try to shape Christianity for the humans, and that
It really is cancer. It really is cancer, but I'm making a video on this next week.
Yeah.
I had quite an accurate description of what you can consider Protestantism to be: priestless Christianity.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you're familiar with the Catholic Church, it doesn't really function without priests.
And it just becomes a mess, really.
Yeah.
The highest authority that they have is essentially scholars, and then postmodern, and then modernism, and then all that stuff after that. Pretty much threw all that into a bin.
And one big thing that initially, at least, was important for me was in a very easy to understand way, establishing the authority of Peter, or the primacy of Peter, I should say.
Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I shall build my church. It wasn't just.
Yes.
It obviously wasn't just faith, because he conferred it specifically to Peter. When if it was purely faith, it would be every single one of the apostles and every single follower of Christ.
And there is a really good talk by a former Baptist turned Catholic. I think it's uploaded on Census Fidelium by a man called Steve Ray, talking about the cultural and linguistical significance of the language used, and how that phrase doesn't necessarily mean much to a 21st century American, but to a first century Jew who would know the scriptures, who would know their own tradition. How, if you interpret it through that lens, it does have more meaning than it might first seem if you read it in modern day English.
Yeah.
It's a very good talk, easy to understand.
I think you should also notice that his name is changed, and that only happens for very specific people that are the first to come in the bigger picture, like Abraham and Sarah and Israel, right? And that only happens with Peter and Paul in the New Testament, which should give you a hint.
So, Ribman, you wanted to say something, but you clicked the disconnect instead of unmuting yourself, and then claimed you were in accident in the DMs. Are you gonna say something, or are you just fine to stay quiet? Oh, I'll take that as a yes.
I think she's she's being she's acting upon recommendations of St. Paul when it comes to women and teaching.
Hey, I'm not in any position to be a teacher either. I'm just a random geezer, but I can see what you're saying.
But if you take this person who might be interested in Christianity, or even more hopefully the church, things that isn't that difficult to understand would to understand the primacy of Peter, And some of the church fathers aren't that difficult to understand either. Just to get what was believed in the early church before you had a canonized New Testament.
Yeah.
It's a fairly easy way to move in this direction.
And then I don't know, just read about the lives of saints. Dope.
Yeah, but that might come later. If you just take this as being someone who might be slightly interested in Christianity, or come to an understanding that what we know to be God does exist, then just to have some pointers on what kind of information to look and maybe where to look for it.
Basically,
Right.
open
I
up your
think-
Bible, your King James Version, which is not God, by the way, it's only the Bible, and flip to Matthew 16. And there you go.
And like I said, if you that can be interpreted in a variety of ways, but there is context that is needed to have to understand what is being said.
Yeah, like it's coming out tomorrow on this channel. I've got a video coming out on St. Ephrem the Syrian, and when he spoke of biblical interpretation, there were two ways. There was the actual factual way, which has exactly one interpretation, which is true or false, and all of it's true. And then you have the mystical interpretation, which has theoretically infinite numbers of interpretations. Because to talk about mysticism is to observe a symbol and then extrapolate different things from it that are actually real. Which is another thing with the Eucharist as well. Like when you say that the Eucharist is just a symbol, no, it is the literal body and blood of Christ. This is indisputable. But to say it's a symbol in the sense of the words that these people were using back then is to suggest that there is a very real presence of God in the Eucharist as well. So you've lost on both counts.
Yeah. And it also comes into importance that which comes just after "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I shall build my church," namely, and the gates of hell shall not. No, I should give to you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against thee. Which is also important with why it's related to why we call the Holy Father the Vicar of Christ, because he has the keys while the king is not currently present.
Right, so
He's
the
the vicar.
right, I think we've covered that enough. The next question is from Gaz, and when he sent me this, he was kind of panicking. He was struggling to reconcile God's will, God's omniscience and omnipotence with free will. So I can give an answer to this. As I said in the video on Monday, God is being. God is being, so he is. The mere utterance of the word is to invoke God, because he is being itself. And we observe from our own nature that we have an indeterminism of choices. So we can choose multiple different things by our nature, and we do this. And God sustains this. He can make things unavailable to us. He can also, influence us in certain ways. But we still have that indeterminism of choice. So we still have freedom of will because it's part of our nature and God sustains that. In terms of omniscience, then, well, the same reason. It's because God is actuality. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
There's also a problem of if you don't have free will, the concept of sin ceases to make much sense, especially given the conditions for mortal sin being full consent of the will.
Well, culpability is a part of all sin. So you can't have culpability with no free will, therefore you've just eliminated sin, which is one of the more important parts of the Bible, I think it's necessary to say.
Well, without sin, why would Christ be necessary?
Exactly, and why would virtue be necessary?
Yeah, you can also say, okay, my conscience exists and it exists outside of the material world, because I don't think that then laws of nature say that 5 trillion atoms in this specific combination spawns something like a conscious. So the determinism that is arguably present in the material world is not present in the immaterial world. So you should have a free will in some form.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, there are laws that govern human nature. Behaviorism
Yeah.
demonstrated that there are certain ways that human beings will usually act, but they don't have to act that way. So, I don't know. You could play around with some Pavlovian responses, but if you think about it, you can actually resist a Pavlovian response. And this goes for all kinds of behaviours as well. Like, you can consciously consciously resist the ability to reciprocate someone being kind to you or something like that. Although it will muck you around because it's against your nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I think does anyone have anything else to add on this particular question?
There's also when you make a very real decision to abstain from something. For example, if you want to fast, if you want to do a complete fast on a Friday, for example, like eating is a natural thing that all animals do, and humans just do too, and you can choose not to do so.
Also, God wants us to love him, and it would be a very kind of cruel sort of love if we didn't have the freedom to what is it called?
Well, yeah,
Love
if
can only
we
be
couldn't actually
completed.
choose to love him, right?
Yeah, it's only a true love if you choose him freely. Yeah. So.
And you can also say, if you don't have a free will, then all your thoughts are governed by the material world, which is random in some.
You'd have no reason for
Way.
prisons if there was no freedom of will.
Yeah.
You couldn't punish somebody because they'd just be like, well, it's like, it's all material, isn't it?
That also. But if there's no free will, then everything just happens randomly because of some fluctuation in the Big Bang thing, and everything works out in some way that
Bazinga, I have no moral responsibility.
it's
Basically.
like all the atoms, all the thoughts you have just came randomly, and that just works out, and for some reason all coherent in some way, but it's all random and you have no responsibility.
Yeah, mechanistic philosophy makes
Yeah.
sense.
But even initially, when I became a Christian, I didn't really have a problem with reconciling God and knowing what I will do, and him not directly making me do things.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily see a problem with this.
I mean, I've never really denied free will, though. It just seems so incredibly self-evident. The only people who appear to deny it are people who are retarded, or
Well, they
to
deny
hide
it
from
because,
something. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they deny it because it makes them feel clever. Like, you know how some people will just play a Socratic dickhead, like, ad infinitum, because it makes
Honestly,
that sock on the floor that's really crusted up. Yeah, I didn't do anything because I didn't
most
have
of
free
it,
will.
most of the time, it's just like an.
You dropped out there.
Sorry, I said most of the time it's just an incredibly ill interpretation of the Libet experiment, mixed with some mechanistic philosophy, which doesn't make sense upon examination.
You should probably articulate what the Libet experiment was, Franzel, because not everyone knows what that is, myself included.
Oh, really?
I mean, I made a video on it like 2 years ago on an old channel, but I haven't had it refreshed in my memory.
Well, it was basically when I think it was the people in the experiment were asked the left or right hand just randomly when they felt like it, and you could see the potential for this emotion being up before it became conscious. And many people take this as evidence for the brain basically making up your decisions before they enter your consciousness, and therefore free will exists. But as many people already pointed out,
That's such a meme. Like, of course there are lizard brain parts of the brain.
I mean, I also am skeptical. How can you measure when you are conscious of something?
Also, like Ed Fazer, like pretty much wrote a blog post to it. That was really good.
Mm.
Where he went into why this doesn't constitute that conscious decision doesn't play a role.
And for those who do not know, Ed Fazer is a Catholic Thomist philosopher.
Okay, so let's move on to the final question, and I'm going to have real fun tearing into this one. Have you read anything by Ayn Rand? What, if any, views do you have on her philosophy? By Sword of Apollo. I haven't actually read any of her books, because I think she's cancer. This is the woman who, as a teenager, used to draw love hearts around Friedrich Nietzsche's name. This is the woman who wrote massive long treatises about romancing industrialists, and then died on the dole when she despised poor people.
I can see my copy of Atlas Shrugged from where I'm sitting.
My copy of the Fountainhead is somewhere in a card box, so...
I'm not surprised you've got a copy, Franzel.
I stole my copies.
Look, when it comes to her books, they are obviously kind of entertaining. I have to admit, like, she isn't the worst type of writer. Her books are page turners. The problem is that her philosophy is incredibly off.
Dude, they should rename them to Atlas Tipped. It's just...
I mean, it's like, even though Atlas Shrugged is a very long, drawn-out story, it's not like I did enjoy when I initially listened and then read it. Like, it's not a whole lot going on. It's just more.
I mean, the philosophy behind it's retarded. Like, so.
Oh yeah.
So there are there's objective morality in the world, if I understand correctly, and yet everything is material. Give me a break. How do you enforce these rules? Where are the rules?
I mean, isn't that a usual problem with a lot of quote-unquote modern thinkers, where they just ignore the more, deep parts or the foundational parts of their own worldview? Because that's difficult. And then you realize that Aristotle and everyone following him was right.
Yeah, it's basically it's Aristotle for autistic teenage girls.
I mean, it's the futile effort of really, really trying to construct a seemingly coherent moral system without God.
Yeah.
And you can try, it just doesn't work. Eventually you will have to rely on either just blatantly denying that there are more moral truths or that truths exist at all, or you will have moral systems that are not justifiable within the framework you that you have set up or that you believe in.
It's just really dumb.
The interesting thing, I think, objectivism, though, is like, okay, it's clearly off. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. It's not even a philosophy. It's basically a joke. But if you look at it,
it's a meme from a female NEET.
Sure, but if you look at it, it's basically also bastardized, incompetently understood Aristotelianism.
See, this is why you rely on Aristotle and Plato and Aquinas and people like that instead of Ayn Rand or Descartes or Nietzsche.
And for someone, there is a lot to take in, and it can be quite difficult and technical depending on how deep you want to go. But it doesn't have to be. Like, you can get a lot of useful knowledge out of just getting the gist of it. Like, you don't need to read the Summa from page to page and have it memorized to find use of Aquinas.
Yeah.
Even just knowing that your faith is not just blind. There are very good reasons to believe what you believe, even though you might not necessarily know them from off the top of your head.
I think Ayn Rand is trying to force you into a binary system, because it's like, we can't have true altruism, right? Because if you do something useful, you will feel happy most of the time.
You can get banged by
So she
millionaire
says.
industrialists in my fan fiction.
But
So
still,
she says, let's switch it around and say, we should encourage people feeling happy, so they do moral acts. It's like, oh, if you want to give to charity, we will give you a
I mean, but still,
sticker. Yeah.
you mentioned, oh no, sorry, Ephraim, you might be familiar with how Emma Jones, in his book, what's it called, Monsters of the Ed, takes a look at the authors behind in that specific book, horror authors, and how a lot of their personal lives is reflected in their literature.
Stephen King is a fucking nutcase. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but specifically, if you look at Ayn Rand, like her, like disgust with any sort of like altruism or collectivism, if you want to use that dreadful term, she grew up in the Soviet Union. Her father's, I think he was a doctor, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he made a decent economical status, and they were effectively robbed of all of that, and then they fled to the United States. Like, it's not very unrealistic to see why that might leave a sour taste in her mouth and take a rather extreme position against that.
Yeah, but it doesn't change the fact that she's still a meme.
Oh yeah, of course not. But
it
does help explaining why she would write as she did to make it good or correct.
You see, this is where you have to take control of your mind.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of awkward how many libertarians philosophy. Like, libertarianism is also still.
What? Sorry, you dropped out there.
I said that it is kind of cringy to look at how many libertarians take a philosophy for granted. Like, I know libertarianism too is a bit of a meme, but still, it's really awkward to see that.
I mean, it's a lot of people do this thing where they skip the really difficult questions and then just take something for granted, like, you can't infringe on my person and I can do anything as long as I don't hurt anyone. And a lot of people just accept that because it sounds, reasonable to them.
You know what really annoys me about is these libertarians who think, well, I don't believe in enforcing a libertarian system because only smart people can do it and I'm smarter than everyone else. Ha 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 ha. Oh, you are?
Yeah.
So then what exactly have you achieved with your life?
I mean, Ayn Rand was super hot.
What?
Or
Did I hear that right? Did you just say that Ayn Rand was super hot?
give me some time. No, she was very much pro-choice because libertarians like to redefine what constitutes a
You talk really slowly.
human and stuff like that.
Ultimately, it's just really lazy moral philosophy.
Let's be fair.
Yeah.
I know about pro-life, but
I mean, I know a bunch of trads who LARP as trads because they think it'll get them women.
That's pretty cringe.
I mean, we're still talking about Ayn Rand, right?
Yeah, I
we're
mean, like,
still
there's LARPers in all groups. It's just that Ayn Rand is a particularly bad example.
I mean, but I don't think many people don't take her seriously, at least anymore. Like you have the clowns like Yaron Brook running around, and
When you become the clown, and that was some deep lore.
Anyway, let me can I say my little piece about
Sure.
Ayn Rand? It's very short. Essentially, objectivism is the ultimate fetishization.
Fetishization.
Pragmatism. Yes, thank you.
Fetishization.
Of
Britisher.
of American pragmaticism, essentially. Like, Americans pride themselves on being pragmatic, and whether or not that's true or not is, I don't know. I guess depends on whether or not you're English. But the whole objectivism, though, is the ultimate. Is just fetishizing that whole thing, and it that's why it seems so undefinable, because that whole thing basically changes with American tastes and stuff like that. I don't.
I mean,
Basically, objectivism is fetishizing American pragmatism. That's basically it, and that's why it's gay.
I mean, I guess it's also very particular to when she was writing. I don't think anyone could come around now and get any sort of like public attention writing what she did.
She didn't get any at a time either. She died on the dole.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it took her quite a lot of work to even get the books released. Like,
but yeah,
most publishers
Imagine
didn't want to touch it.
Dying while writing hyper-capitalistic fan fiction. That's what Ayn Rand is going to be remembered for the next couple of generations. She was that woman who wrote hyper-capitalist fan fiction.
With rape fantasies.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, and the Fountainhead there's like...
no.
Of course there fucking is. Of course there is.
But there are really like bizarre sections in Atlas Shrugged, like when Francisco D'Anconia gets the state to invest a bunch in his like, isn't it a mining business, and then he like blows the mines up just to liquidate the state's the state's capital, just to mess with them, I guess, or because they haven't earned it or whatever.
This is like the Marquis de Sade if applied to money.
That's actually a pretty good comparison.
I mean, it really does sound like that. So, does anyone have any final thoughts on this particular book? Or
No,
lady?
there's not much to talk about, like, really, unless someone has any specific questions on it.
You know, I tell you, she wrote a heck of a lot for such a simple and retarded idea. It's like one of the Greek sophists writing a bunch of novels about some sort of rhetoric they used in one speech.
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't derive real world view from fiction alone. So
Christ cuck.
that's all.
So by the way, like, if anyone wants to check out like a really good video that is critical of objectivism, I would recommend the Distributist video on objectivism.
Yeah, because
Where
he
he
was
talks
awesome.
about Bioshock and Ayn Rand.
When I initially read Atlas Shrugged, I did agree with it, but that didn't last for long.
Like, even in my libertarian phase when started... Okay, this is entertaining, but also kind of cringy.
Yeah, that's true.
So, any final thoughts in general from any of these questions?
I guess if there are more questions regarding the first one eventually, like picking a church or coming to the decision of what church is the correct one is a very important one, especially for people who are coming to the understanding of that God is real and Christianity is true religion. But there need to be more specific things, like what objections do people have.
It's not really something that I can answer in like 15 minutes. You have to spend a year at least reading
yeah,
it.
of course. But some people might have some like specific problems that they might wonder about, like, oh, how do we justify the primacy of Peter, or what is apostolic succession, or what is a sacrament, or what is the church? And this can be answered like quite quickly.
Yeah.
But they need to be like directed specific questions.
Is Ribman going to say anything, or is she going to click the disconnect button yet again? Remember, the thing with the microphone, Ribman, if you want to say something. Because I'm sure you've got something to say. You've been in and out of this call like 5 times, like twice even. I'll take that as a no. Okay, thanks everyone for watching. Oh wait, she's blooming typing. Let me guess, it's going to be another one of those 5-minute things where it's just an emoji. Again!
That's cool.
Oh, women. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I hope this was enjoyable, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye. A very big thank you to those on the list here. These are subscribers to the Renaissance Man program who get audio books and controversial videos every week for $5 a month. There's already quite a lot of content there, so if you check it out in the description, you won't be missing out. Thank you.